today's mindful moment. All right, let's lift the curtain a bit today.
Okay.
And peek behind those marble columns
Sounds good.
of, the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
We're diving into Joan Biskupic's book, 9 Black Robes,
Okay.
to see how personal dynamics, power plays, and some maybe even drama
Right.
shape some of the most important decisions in our country.
I think one of the things that really struck me was how Biskupic kind of reveals the human side of the court.
Yeah.
You know, we tend to think of these justices as these like legal titans,
Right.
almost mythical figures.
Untouchable, right?
Yeah, but they're also people. You
Yeah.
know, they're navigating relationships,
Yeah.
ambitions,
Yeah.
the weight of these decisions they're making.
It's like that moment in The Wizard of Oz, right?
All right.
When you pull back the curtain and you see it's just a guy pulling the levers,
Yeah.
like suddenly it demystifies this whole institution.
Exactly. And Biskupic really emphasizes how individual justices can make or break the court's direction.
Right.
And the book really zeroes in on the shift after Justice Kennedy retired.
Oh, that's right.
He was like the swing vote for so long.
Yeah.
The kingmaker, they called him.
Yeah.
And then with Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett all appointed by Trump, suddenly the balance tipped really hard to the right.
And it wasn't just about the number of conservative justices.
Right.
It was the kind of conservative that were right.
Right.
Like Biskupic digs into the whole Federalist Society thing.
Right.
And how this like conservative legal powerhouse
Yeah.
has been shaping the court for decades.
Yeah. And Don McGahn, Trump's White House counsel,
Right.
he was all about insourcing judicial selection.
Yeah.
So making sure that only those aligned with the Federalist Society got through.
The vetting process.
And his own father, by the way, was involved in the organization.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Shows you the level of commitment they have to this project.
So it's not just about like Trump appointing conservative judges.
Yeah.
It's this whole movement. Right?
It's a whole movement.
To reshape the courts.
Absolutely.
But, okay, so how does this actually play out?
Yeah.
Like, how does this ideology translate into actual decisions?
Well, let's take Citizens United, for example.
Okay.
This 2010 ruling that basically said that corporations have the same free speech rights as individuals when it comes to political spending.
Okay.
The result, huge influx of corporate money into elections.
So that's a pretty clear example of how a specific case reflects this whole conservative ideology.
Absolutely.
But Biskupic doesn't just focus on the legal arguments.
No.
She gives us these little glimpses into the relationships between the justices.
Yeah.
Like that story about Chief Justice Roberts.
Oh, yeah.
And how he made sure Amy Coney Barrett got one of the best chambers in the building.
Yeah. So right after Justice Ginsburg died, Roberts had her chambers packed up immediately.
Oh, wow.
Which meant that Barrett got a prime spot. But, you know, it struck some as a little bit of a power play.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe even a little disrespectful to Ginsburg's legacy.
It really makes you wonder about those behind-the-scenes dynamics.
Yeah.
Like, are there alliances?
Yeah.
Rivalries?
Right.
Do they all eat lunch together? Or are there separate tables for the liberals and the conservatives?
Biskupic doesn't really get into the gossip, but she does highlight some of the tension and the attempts at bridge building. Like, there's this anecdote about Justice Sotomayor trying to smooth things over with Kavanaugh after his really controversial confirmation hearing.
Oh, yeah. The one where he got really defensive.
Exactly.
Denying the sexual assault allegations.
Yeah. Really intense.
Yeah.
So Sotomayor shared a story with him about how another justice had welcomed Justice Thomas after the Anita Hill hearings, encouraging Kavanaugh to focus on his work on the court, you know?
Yeah.
It seems like they're aware of how their actions are perceived and how important it is to maintain some level of collegiality.
It's almost like they're trying to hold it together.
Yeah.
Knowing that the court's image is taking a hit.
Right.
Okay, so speaking of things that didn't help the court's image.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Trump effect.
Okay.
Biskupic argues that Trump's presidency directly impacted the court's work.
It's undeniable.
Yeah.
His attacks on the judiciary, calling judges who ruled against him Obama judges, really eroded public trust.
Right.
And his administration also used the court strategically.
Oh, interesting.
Knowing exactly which buttons to push.
Like with those travel bans, right?
Exactly.
Biskupic explains how they used emergency interventions from the court to push through their policies while challenges were still pending.
Yeah.
Talk about working the system.
Right.
And the book really dives into how all of this fueled this public perception.
Right.
That the court is just another political battleground.
Yeah, it's a big concern.
It is. Okay, so how is this increasingly conservative court impacting American law and society?
Well, let's start with a case that's had huge consequences for voting rights.
Okay.
Shelby County v. Holder.
Ah, yes, the case that gutted the Voting Rights Act.
Yeah, Biskupic argues that this led to a wave of voter suppression tactics.
Right.
Especially in the South.
Right.
So the court struck down a key provision of the Voting Rights Act called preclearance.
Right.
So certain states with a history of racial discrimination no longer had to get federal approval for changing their voting laws.
Okay, and what happened?
Well, we saw a surge in restrictive voting laws.
Oh, yeah.
Voter ID requirements.
Right.
Limits on early voting.
Right.
And all of these disproportionately impacted minority voters.
So it wasn't just about overturning a law.
No.
It was about changing the rules of the game.
Exactly.
In a way that many argue undermined equal access to voting.
Right. It shifted the playing field.
Yeah. And Biskupic really drives home how these legal decisions have real-world consequences, right?
Absolutely.
They're playing out in communities across the country.
Yeah. It's not just abstract. It's people's lives.
Exactly. Okay, so let's talk about DACA.
Okay.
The Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program.
Right.
Trump tried to end it.
Right. Yeah.
And the case ended up before the Supreme Court.
It did.
Now, what's interesting here is that Biskupic shows Chief Justice Roberts, who's conservative.
Right.
He seems genuinely concerned about the fate of these DACA recipients.
Yeah, he even cited a brief filed by businesses highlighting the economic impact of ending the program.
It's like he's walking this tightrope between his conservative leanings and this awareness of the court's image.
Yeah.
He wants to avoid these drastic shifts that could damage public trust.
Exactly.
So in the DACA case, he sided with the liberals.
He did.
Upholding the program.
Right.
At least temporarily. But Biskupic points out, this didn't provide a permanent solution.
No.
So the fate of these DACA recipients was still kind of up in the air.
Yeah, still a lot of uncertainty.
It seems like the court's always wrestling with this tension between ideology and pragmatism, sticking to a conservative agenda versus recognizing the fallout of these huge changes.
Yeah, it's a tough balance.
But even with Roberts sometimes trying to moderate things, the court's made some decisions that have reshaped American society.
Yeah.
And probably no case is a bigger example of that than the overturning of Roe v. Wade.
Absolutely.
Dogs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization.
Yeah.
Huge,
Seismic.
Eliminating the constitutional right to abortion.
Right.
Leaving it up to individual states to decide.
Yeah.
And Biskupic kind of lays the groundwork for this decision.
Yeah.
Taking us through these earlier abortion cases, like June Medical Services v. Russo.
Right.
The Louisiana case was a warning sign, right?
Yeah.
Even though the court struck down the law restricting abortion, it was a narrow 5-4 decision.
Right.
And Roberts sided with the liberals.
Right.
You could feel things shifting.
Yeah, especially after Barrett joined the court.
Right, and then Dobbs happened.
Yeah.
Everything changed.
It did.
Biskupic says that Roberts initially voted to uphold Mississippi's 15-week ban.
Oh, wow.
But he didn't want to completely overturn Roe.
Right.
He wanted a more gradual approach.
Interesting.
Which, again, maybe speaks to his concern about the court's image.
Yeah, maybe even his own legacy.
But the other conservatives held firm.
Yeah.
And delivered a decision that's had this massive impact.
Huge impact.
On reproductive rights.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't just about abortion.
No.
Justice Thomas, in his own separate opinion, he suggested the court should reconsider other precedents based on the right to privacy. Like access to contraception.
Yeah.
Even same-sex marriage.
He's been critical of those precedents for a while. But this was a real alarm bell.
Yeah.
It signaled that the court, with this conservative majority, might be willing to overturn other longstanding rights.
Wow. Okay, so 9 black robes isn't just legal analysis.
No.
It's about understanding the people.
The people.
Behind these decisions.
Yeah.
Their motivations, their relationships.
Relationships.
The consequences of their action.
Absolutely.
And it leaves you with this feeling that the court is at a turning point.
Definitely.
The decisions made by these 9 justices are reshaping America.
Yeah.
So much more to uncover.
Absolutely.
They're just getting started with 9 black robes.
Let's dive deeper. One of the things that really struck me about 9 black robes is how Biskupic lays out the Federalist Society's long game.
Right.
It wasn't just about getting conservative judges on the bench.
Yeah.
It was like a decades-long strategy to reshape the entire judiciary.
Like they had a master plan.
Yeah.
Biskupic takes it all the way back to the 80s.
Yeah, the 80s, that's right.
When they were founded. It's crazy to think a small group of law students
yeah.
would end up having such a huge impact on the Supreme Court.
I know.
It's pretty remarkable.
And figures like Scalia
right.
and Leonard Leo, they were so instrumental in that rise.
Yeah.
And Biskupic connects it to this whole larger conservative movement,
right.
working with groups like the Heritage Foundation
right.
to push their ideology and identify potential nominees.
Yeah, so it was this whole coordinated effort.
It was
building a pipeline of conservative legal minds.
Off the way to the top.
From law school to the Supreme Court.
That's right.
And it's not just about ideology.
No.
There's also power and ambition, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Biskupic gets into some of the controversies around some of these nominees.
But just right, like Kavanaugh's confirmation hearings.
Yeah.
Those were so contentious.
Those accusations, his testimony.
All of it.
And then Amy Coney Barrett.
Right.
Nominated weeks before the election. Those nominations really raised concerns about the politicization of the court.
Yeah. It felt like a preview of what to expect.
Yeah, exactly.
Each new justice is like another piece on the chessboard.
Right.
Shifting the balance of power.
Yeah.
On all these different issues.
Gun control, religious freedom.
Right.
Limits of executive power.
But Biskupic reminds us, these justices are human beings.
They are.
Not just legal robots.
Right.
She gives us glimpses into their personalities, their relationships.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's surprising.
I know. Like Sotomayor, a liberal, has this warm relationship with Thomas.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Arguably the most conservative justice.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that even in this environment, there's still room for those connections.
For human connection.
Yeah.
And then Tegan, she's known for being this brilliant legal mind.
Right.
But Biskupic talks about her sense of humor.
Oh, yeah.
Cracking jokes during oral arguments.
Keep things light.
But of course, Biskupic doesn't sugarcoat things.
No.
She also gets into the conflicts and tensions.
Right. Between the justices.
Especially as the court has become more divided.
Yeah.
One of the most intriguing figures is Chief Justice Roberts.
What does she say about him?
She portrays him as this shrewd strategist.
Okay.
Very aware of the court's image, its place in history.
Right.
He's always wrestling with his own conservative views.
Yeah.
And this desire to maintain the court's legitimacy.
He's on that tightrope.
He is.
We talked about that earlier.
Like in the DACA case.
Right.
He sided with the liberals.
Right.
Maybe to avoid a drastic shift in the law.
Right.
But then in Dobbs, he joined the conservative majority.
It's like he's trying to read the tea leaves.
Yeah.
And figure out which way the wind is blowing.
It's a tough dilemma.
It is.
Should a Chief Justice try to steer the court toward consensus?
Right.
Even if it means compromising their own principles?
Or should they just prioritize their own legal interpretations?
Yeah.
Even if it creates division and backlash?
Right.
Biskupic doesn't give us any easy answers.
No.
But she gives us this nuanced perspective on Roberts.
Yeah.
And the challenges he faces.
In this polarized court.
And I think that's one of the things that makes Nine Black Robes so valuable.
Yeah.
It doesn't offer these simplistic answers.
No.
It gets into the complexities,
the
human factors.
It brings the court to life.
Yeah.
You see the personalities, the relationships, the maneuvering.
Right.
And she doesn't shy away from the criticisms, concerns about partisanship, special interests.
Right. She quotes legal scholars who say the court's legitimacy is at stake.
Yeah.
As its decisions increasingly reflect our political divisions.
Right.
And she points to cases like Bush v. Gore, where the court's intervention in the election was seen as partisan.
Undermining public trust.
Exactly.
So it's a reminder that the court's power rests on its legitimacy.
Right.
If people lose faith.
Yeah.
It has huge consequences for our democracy.
And Biskupic doesn't just focus on the past.
No.
She looks to the future. What if a president tries to overturn an election and the court sides with them?
Oh, wow.
What if they keep chipping away at voting rights?
Scary stuff.
It's unsettling.
It is.
But it highlights the fact that the court isn't this distant, abstract entity.
Right.
its decisions have a direct impact on our lives.
On our rights, our democracy.
Exactly. Yeah. So we need to understand how it works.
Yeah.
Who these justices are.
The factors that influence their decisions.
And Nine Black Robes gives us that deep dive.
That inside look.
It's not just about understanding the law.
No.
It's about understanding the people, the politics, the pressures.
And Biskupic's book helps us have that conversation.
About the role of the court in our society.
Exactly.
All right, let's zoom in on some specific cases.
Okay.
Starting with the fight over voting rights.
That's a big one.
It's at the heart of our democracy.
It is.
And Biskupic shows how the court under Roberts has shaped that landscape.
Absolutely.
One case that stands out is Shelby County v. Holder.
Right, we talked about that earlier.
Gutted the Voting Rights Act.
Yeah.
But Biskupic takes us inside the court.
Yeah.
We see the legal arguments, the clashes.
A 5-4 decision.
Yeah.
They struck down the pre-clearance requirement, which had required certain states to get federal approval before changing their election laws.
And the majority argued that the requirement was outdated.
Yeah.
Not necessary anymore.
Right.
But the dissent warned about voter suppression.
Yeah. And those warnings were right.
Biskupic details how states implemented restrictive voting laws.
Voter ID requirements, cutbacks in early voting.
Limits on absentee voting.
It's all connected to that Federalist Society agenda.
Right.
Limiting federal power, rolling back civil rights protections.
So it's not just a legal debate.
No.
These decisions have consequences.
Real consequences.
Shaping the electorate, influencing elections.
Exactly.
It shows that the court isn't neutral.
It's not.
It's embedded in our politics, our society.
It's a part of the fabric.
Okay, let's move on to campaign finance. Biskupic takes us back to Citizens United.
Right.
Unleashed all that corporate spending.
Yeah.
So what were the arguments there?
Well, they basically said corporations have the same First Amendment rights as individuals when it comes to political spending.
So corporations are people, too.
At least when it comes to money.
Right.
They argued that limiting spending is censorship.
Right.
Violates the First Amendment.
But critics say this gives corporations too much influence.
Way too much.
They can drown out ordinary citizens.
Exactly.
It's like a megaphone for the wealthy.
Yeah, amplifying their voices.
While the rest of us are trying to shout over them.
And Biskupic points out this is a prime example of how the court under Roberts has expanded First Amendment protections for corporations.
At the expense of regulating campaign spending.
Yeah.
Limiting the influence of money.
It's fueled cynicism.
It has.
Concerns about special interests.
And it's probably going to continue.
Most likely.
Okay, let's talk about religious liberty. Biskupic traces how the court has become more receptive to these claims.
Yeah, religious exemption.
From laws that infringe on beliefs.
Especially in cases involving same-sex marriage.
Right.
Contraception coverage.
Anti-discrimination laws.
It's this clash of values.
It is.
Playing out in courtrooms.
Biskupic explains both sides.
She does.
The court's trying to find a balance.
Yeah.
Between religious freedom and equal rights.
Tough balance.
And she shows how these decisions impact people's lives.
Real people.
She talks about the baker who refused to bake a cake for a same-sex wedding.
Citing his beliefs.
The employer who refused contraception coverage. Citing religious objections.
Yeah.
And the concerns of LGBTQ people who fear discrimination.
So it's not just abstract.
No.
It has real consequences. And this issue isn't going away as the court grapples with the boundaries
of religious freedom.
We'll see more cases testing the limits of this right.
It's a debate about what it means to be American. And Biskupic's book helps us understand
complexity
and have a thoughtful discussion
about the future of religious liberty.
Okay, let's shift gears.
Okay.
Talk about individual rights and national security.
That's a big one.
Always a tension, right?
Always.
But it's taken on new urgency post 9/11.
Absolutely.
The court's grappling with surveillance,
so tension,
limits of executive power in times of crisis.
Right.
Biskupic takes us through some key cases.
Yeah.
The Patriot Act.
The NSA's programs.
Guantanamo Bay.
Big questions about security and freedom.
Yeah.
The government's claims versus individual rights.
It's a legal tug of war.
It is.
Trying to find the right balance.
Right.
And the court has often sided with the government.
They have.
But Biskupic highlights the dissenting voices.
Ginsburg, Sotomayor,
yeah,
they argued that the court has to protect individual rights.
Even in times of crisis.
Yeah.
And that the government's powers shouldn't be expanded without safeguards. It's a check on executive power. And Biskupic points out these decisions have consequences.
They do.
Shaping how we think about security and freedom in this post-9/11 world.
And as technology evolves, more challenges.
For privacy and security.
The court will have to grapple with even more complex questions.
How do we balance security with privacy? Yeah. How do we protect democracy without sacrificing freedom?
Big questions.
No easy answers.
But 9 Black Robes gives us the context.
The insight.
To start thinking about them.
It's a reminder that the court isn't just a legal institution.
It's a reflection of us.
Our values, our fears.
Yeah.
And as we face the challenges of the 21st century,
right,
the court will play a key role
in shaping our democracy. You know, one thing that's been on my mind as we've been talking about 9 Black Robes is this whole idea of the court's legitimacy.
Yeah, that's come up a few times. What do we even mean by legitimacy when we talk about the Supreme Court?
It really comes down to public trust. For the court to work, people need to believe that its decisions are based on the law.
Right.
Not on politics or personal agendas.
Yeah.
If people lose that trust, the court loses its authority.
So it's not just about being right.
No.
It's about being seen as legitimate.
Exactly. And Biskupic brings up this really scathing critique from Judge Lynn Edelman.
Oh, yeah. Didn't he write that law review article
where
he basically called out Chief Justice Roberts and the conservative majority?
He did.
For undermining democracy.
Yeah, he was pretty blunt.
What did he say?
Well, he accused Roberts of abandoning any pretense of neutrality.
Wow.
Despite what he said during his confirmation hearings.
Right, right.
And Biskupic also includes some pretty interesting comments from lower court judges.
Oh, yeah?
During those election challenges back in 2020.
Oh, you mean when judges appointed by both Democrats and Republicans were basically like, wait, what evidence?
Exactly. They were shocked at how flimsy Trump's claims were.
Yeah.
And they were worried about the damage those lawsuits were doing
to public faith in the elections.
Yeah. One judge even wrote that he wondered why they even bothered coming to federal court.
What does he mean?
Well, he pointed out that federal judges don't appoint the president.
Oh, right, right.
It's almost funny,
yeah,
but also really concerning.
It is. It shows how much pressure our system was under.
Yeah.
And how important it is for the courts to stay neutral.
To be above the fray.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Biskupic says that some experts are really worried about what this all means for the future.
Yeah, she quotes Richard Hasen, who warns that even though Trump failed to overturn the 2020 election,
right,
a future president might try the same thing.
And they might succeed.
And they might succeed, especially if they pack the court with partisan justices.
That's a scary thought.
It is. The court could become just another political weapon.
Where the outcome is already decided before the case even begins.
Yeah, based on ideology, not law.
So what happens if people just lose faith in the court completely?
That's the big question.
Will they still respect its decisions?
Right. Will they trust the court to protect their rights?
Biskupic doesn't give us all the answers.
No, but she gives us the tools to ask the right questions.
It's like she's giving us a roadmap.
Yeah, a guide to understanding how the court works.
How decisions are made.
And what's at stake.
This whole conversation has really changed how I see the court.
In what way?
I used to think of it as this distant, powerful institution.
Yeah, kind of untouchable.
But Biskupic's book makes it feel more real.
More human.
Yeah, we see the justices as people.
With flaws, ambitions.
And their decisions have this ripple effect.
They do.
Touching all of our lives.
Whether we agree with them or not.
9 Black Robes is a must-read for anyone who cares about our democracy.
It's a journey into one of the most powerful institutions in our country.
So we encourage you to check it out.
What do you think?
What insights resonated with you?
Yeah, what questions do you have about the future of the court?
Share your thoughts with us.
We'd love to hear from you.
And remember, even though these issues can feel overwhelming,
yeah, it's easy to get discouraged.
Understanding them is the first step.
To making a difference.
So stay curious, stay informed.
And join us next time.
For another deep dive into a topic that matters.
Make sure to subscribe to the deep dive and share this episode with your friends. We're constantly exploring new and challenging ideas, things that make you question what you think you know.
And we've included a purchase link for the book in the show notes, just for you. Keep those minds sharp and never stop questioning. Until next time.